The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented.
Hello and welcome to Health for a Lifetime. I'm your host, Don McIntosh, and today I'm going to be talking with Dr. David DeRose. Welcome back, Doctor.
Good to be back with you, Don.
Now, you work at the Lifestyle Center of America in preventive medicine. What exactly does that mean?
Well, you know, most people, Don, when they think of preventive medicine, they think of preventing things from ever happening in the first place. And that really is a part of preventive medicine. That's what we call primary prevention, preventing a disease process or a condition from ever occurring. But really, much of what we do at the Lifestyle Center of America is secondary prevention and tertiary prevention.
Wow, that sounds like a very important word.
Yeah, we usually don't tell the public about this, but we tell them we're helping them with their disease processes.
Right.
So people come to us with their diabetes or their heart disease, their high blood pressure, their weight problems, their cholesterol problems, their arthritis. They come with these conditions, and we intervene. We work with them on a lifestyle-based program, trying to de-emphasize the need for medications, trying to avoid surgery, and use more natural lifestyle-based approaches.
So lifestyle, what exactly is that?
Well, lifestyle has to do with the things that we choose to do on a day-to-day basis. It has to do with how we sleep, how many hours we sleep. It has to do with how we eat. It has to do with whether or not we exercise and if we do what we choose to do.
Okay.
It has to do with our social contacts, our spirituality.
Let's talk about eating. You know, I hear a lot about vegetarian diets, and there's a lot of benefits we hear about that. Do you have to be a total vegetarian to get the maximum benefits?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting question, the way you ask it, Don. Let me tell it to you this way first. The more we move in the direction of a plant-based diet, the more we get a number of benefits. When it comes to heart disease, when it comes to cholesterol reduction, cancer prevention, but you don't have to be a total vegetarian to get some benefit. In other words, someone who starts decreasing their meat and eating more fruits and vegetables is going to benefit themselves in terms of decreasing their risk of a host of killer diseases. A recent study in Iowa looking at women's health, they found that women who were eating more whole grains, for example, were decreasing their risk substantially of developing diabetes in as short a time as 5 years down the road. So using more whole grains like whole wheat and whole oats, instead of maybe so much meat and fat, butter, cheese, these women are benefiting their health. But the more we move in that direction of eating more plant foods, the more it seems we benefit. Classic case in point is with prostate cancer. In the famous Adventist Health Study, they looked at men and their eating habits in terms of things like meat, things like milk, things like eggs, things like cheese. They looked at each of those categories, and the more of those animal products they ate, the higher their risk of death from prostate cancer.
So it does really matter, and even small changes can make a big difference.
That's the message I try to give people. They don't have to be overwhelmed by the thought of being a total vegetarian. Move in that direction, and you're going to experience benefits.
Should anyone not be a vegetarian?
Should anyone not be a vegetarian?
In other words, should everyone be a vegetarian? There's another way to say that.
Well, Don, I like people to know when I work with them as my patients, when I speak publicly, when we're doing this program together.
Okay.
I don't want people to feel like they've got to be a vegetarian. I mean, that is not the big message in health. The message that I try to give is, yes, the research is pointing to the vegetarian diet as being the optimal diet, the best diet. But if a person feels that they can't embrace that diet for whatever reasons, if they feel socially, if they feel physically there's problems with it, if they feel income-wise. Now, it's interesting, Don, the income issue, because most people find that when they adopt a vegetarian diet, they save a lot of money. But whatever the barriers are, you don't have to look at this huge mountain and say, I can't climb the mountain, I can't be a total vegetarian. Start moving in that direction. Add more fruits, add more vegetables, add more whole grains, add the beans and the nuts. All of these things have been demonstrated to make a difference as far as our health.
well, let's say I really like my milk, I really like my eggs, I really like my cheese, and I like a little bit of my meat too. I'm a, you know, let's say I just really don't want to give those things up. What do you say to patients like that come to the Lifestyle Center of America?
Don, nobody likes to change. None of us do. We're comfortable with the way we live. But the beauty of lifestyle change is the way the Creator made us. God created us with the ability to choose what we will enjoy. And when we realize that, when we realize that I can develop new tastes, new enjoyments, I can look at changing lifestyle as an adventure rather than a burden. I got to tell you about a patient who came to the Lifestyle Center of America, Larry Martin. Now, Larry is a high-powered engineer.
Okay.
He's literally a rocket scientist.
From NASA or something like that.
You got the idea. And Larry came to us from Texas, and he had drawn some lines before he came. He was a man who liked his meat. He wasn't really open to change, but he was willing to come to the Lifestyle Center of America, where we serve a total vegetarian diet, and some dramatic things happened.
Okay.
We've got a clip of Larry sharing himself what happened during
Probably nothing more eloquent than listening to Larry himself. Let's join Larry.
Yes, that was probably the biggest surprise I had here, other than all the staff and the apparent care and interest that they had. I don't guess I'd ever had a meal in my life that didn't have at least one type of meat on it. And on the literature you sent me before I came down, you had this nice little quiet phrase buried in all of that said, you'll get to enjoy 3 wonderful vegetarian meals a day. And I knew that someone had lost their mind. It just, that wasn't going to be. But then I convinced myself that I could put up with it for a while. Being an engineer and all that type of thing, I knew I could make that happen. So I got in my truck and started up here. But along about Ardmore, I run into a significant moment of weakness, and I pulled into a grocery store there, and I bought $93 worth of prepared meats and hid it in my luggage. All the jerky they had, things like that. Because I knew darn good and well I wasn't going to last 19 days with no meat. Got up here and I quickly hid it in the chest and covered it up with all my clothes and all that, but I knew exactly, I had it laid out where I knew all the different things I had, and I was visualizing how great they were going to be to go with this bunch of vegetables you guys were going to try to feed me. Surprisingly enough, as you're well aware, I gave that entire stock totally unopened to my doctor when I left here because I never missed it. I loved the food. It was fantastic.
That's an amazing story.
It's a tremendous story.
Hides the jerky.
Yeah, he's got all this contraband meat in our vegetarian institution.
So what happened? Did he bring it down to a program and confess?
That's what he did. At the graduation, he said, look, I never needed this stuff. And he gave it all to the physician who was caring for him. The thing that it illustrates, Don, is here was someone who was a dyed-in-the-wool meat eater. He could not imagine life as a vegetarian, but he made a critical decision. Mm-hmm. He was actually going to try a vegetarian lifestyle for a while. Now, if you heard him talking, that wasn't really why he came to us. He came to us because he had other health problems, but he was kind of hedging his bets. He didn't burn all his bridges, but he was willing he was willing to try a vegetarian diet, though. And once the guy starts eating it, he says, I mean, this is really palatable. This is a good diet. And I want to give a message to people, Don. If they feel like they've tried vegetarian foods and it doesn't taste good, they've been eating the wrong foods. They haven't been eating foods from the right chef. Now, I'm exaggerating a little bit. because it does take a while for our taste to change. But the point is, if we make a change and stick with it, Larry did it for 19 days.
Let me ask you this question. Speaking about choice, it's all well and good. We hear Larry here, and it's quite amusing, and yet he made a choice. Is there any scientific data that goes along with our ability to make a choice? Have scientists found out that we can indeed make choices and actually change?
Oh, I mean, this is very clear when it comes to dietary practices. I mean, study after study. I mean, classic study has to do with salt. When people dramatically decrease their salt consumption, the food at first tastes bland. I mean, people could say, well, am I going to live the rest of my life enjoying this bland food? I mean, is it worth it for my blood pressure, or my fluid buildup, or my congestive heart failure? Whatever reason they decrease the salt. At first, the food tastes terrible.
Right.
But when they stick with it, they develop new enjoyments. They start to enjoy the low-sodium foods. And when you give them that choice morsel that they had saved from a year ago, that high-salt menu item, it's distasteful.
They don't like it.
The same has been shown with fat. Classic pilot study, the Women's Intervention Nutrition Study, a study looking at decreasing fat consumption in women that have had breast cancer. In the pilot research, in the preliminary research to this big study, they actually had women decrease their fat consumption. Those that decreased their fat consumption, not only did you see changes in different measurements, their weight, their blood fats and things, but most importantly, from the standpoint of our discussion, their tastes changed. They developed a distaste for the high-fat foods they used to enjoy. That was true for the majority of those women.
So, you know, scientists study this. Have they ever gotten nervous that as they do this study, people won't make the right choices and they'll lose all their research money? Have they ever done a study that says, hey, can these people really change? Because I'm researching this and I really want to know whether or not.
I mean, this is a big issue. That's why they do pilot studies. Can people change and stick with it? And they find in this kind of research that people, especially when they get benefits from their lifestyle change, they stick with these things. The tastes change, plus they get the benefits of the new way of living.
Well, then why is it that every time not myself personally, but I hear people, they come through our health program, they come through yours, and many times they'll say things like, well, I went to my doctor, and my doctor says, this is what you really should do, but I don't think anybody can make that change. Why do doctors say that? Why do other people say that?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, I believe it's unfortunate, Don. And the reason it's unfortunate is most doctors have not had the experience of making dramatic lifestyle changes. Now, I have a unique advantage because I was not raised a vegetarian. I was raised on a pretty typical American lifestyle. I don't blame my parents for that. And some people think I had better habits than others when they hear that I ate a regular breakfast. But my regular breakfast when I arrive at high school was going to the vending machines and having a Coke and a candy bar. I mean, that was my routine, and I would frequent the fast food restaurants. But I've changed my lifestyle, and you know what? The quality of my life is better. I enjoy my new way of eating better. I don't have a lot of stomach problems that I used to have. And so when I talk with patients, Don, about lifestyle change, it's not just based on the medical research, it's based on my own experience. And I've made dramatic changes. Yeah, it's difficult to make the changes at first, but over the long haul, once you've done it, you wouldn't have it any other way.
You still have an occasional candy bar?
You know what? I have not had a candy bar in probably 20 years. Now, I have had
20 years? How do you do this?
Because I've developed a new taste. I don't want a candy bar.
Okay, great.
I was in an awkward situation once where I felt socially constrained to accept I'll tell you the story. I was in a kind of an informal singing group, and we'd sing for shut-ins. It's kind of a captive audience, you'd say.
For those that can't get out of their homes.
Right.
Okay.
And so we'd go in, and we went to a new home one day. We were singing for them. Apparently the people that were caring for those who couldn't get out of the house were so touched that they slipped off into the kitchen, unbeknownst to us, and all of a sudden they appear with a big tray with individual paper plates with cookies and ice cream. Now, at this point, I was several years into a new lifestyle, even though every night, some years before, I'd have things like cookies and ice cream. Now, I didn't want cookies and ice cream. Now, the fellow next to me, I looked at him, and he had a real good strategy. He slipped the cookies into his pocket.
Nice.
But doesn't work for ice cream, Don. So
that could be a problem.
So I said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to just kind of play with the ice cream a little bit. I really didn't want to eat it and eat a little bit of it. And I didn't want to offend the people. I thought it was important socially to do this, accept their hospitality. And so as I'm eating a little bit of this ice cream, it tastes sickeningly sweet and fat. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm literally kind of feeling sick. I mean, I didn't actually get sick, but I said, I used to eat this food all the time. I used to enjoy it. But now it is distasteful. And when you make a clean break with things, Don, that's what tends to happen. So I don't miss the ice cream, the cookies, and I enjoy the lifestyle I'm following.
So the only thing you might need is Ziploc bags inside your suit coats in case this happens again, right?
You know, I haven't gone that far yet, but it's a good idea.
We're talking with Dr. David DeRose. We're talking about the fact that you can, in fact, change. God has given you the power of choice. When we come back, we want to talk more about how we can cook so that we can enjoy the food. Larry threw away his whole stash, and maybe you can too. Join us when we come back.
Have you found yourself wishing that you could shed a few pounds? Have you been on a diet for most of your life, but not found anything that will really keep the weight off? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, then we have a solution for you that works. Dr. Hans Deal and Dr. Eileen Luddington have written a marvelous booklet called Reversing Obesity Naturally, and we'd like to send it to you free of charge. Here's a medically sound approach successfully used by thousands who were able to eat more and lose weight permanently without feeling guilty or hungry through lifestyle medicine. Dr. Deal and Dr. Luddington have been featured on 3ABN, and in this booklet, they present a sensible approach to eating, nutrition, and lifestyle changes that can help you prevent heart disease, diabetes, and even cancer. Call or write today for your free copy of Reversing Obesity Naturally, and you could be on your way to a healthier, happier you. It's absolutely free of charge, so call or write today.
Welcome back. We've been talking with Dr. David DeRose. We've been talking about the fact that you can change and what you should change too if you want to be healthy. We've been talking about being a vegetarian, and you've said, hey, not everybody has to be one, but to the extent that you can be one, you're going to be healthy. Isn't that right?
It's true, and the other point we're making is many people think they can't make dramatic changes.
Larry.
Like Larry, because they've never tried. The difference with Larry is he was willing to go into a situation where he had to make some changes.
If you just joined us, I mean, Larry came to the Lifestyle Center of America, and before he got there, he said, look, I've got to stock up on some meat and some different things, because there's this silent phrase there that we're going to have vegetarian meals. And then later on, he confessed this to everybody and had given up the meat.
He never ate the meat the whole 19 days.
And so there is the ability to change, and people can make that choice. But I think I really want to hear what you have to say about this, and I think you're going to show us some footage of this. I think it's really important when someone's making that transition that the food that they're now experiencing is good food. Do you think that's important?
No, you're right. The food has got to taste good. But the other thing is, I mean, it was not just enough for Larry or anyone who goes through our program at the Lifestyle Center of America to see that the food tastes good. I mean, we're in rural Oklahoma. Yes, we have a great program. People come from all over the country and outside the country. But let's face it, it's a long commute from New York City, where we've had patients come, and from Southern California to come to Oklahoma. So people have to be convinced not only that vegetarian meals can taste good, but that they're accessible to them at home, that they can either prepare these things, that they can somehow take advantage of a vegetarian diet in their own environment. And that's why we have cooking classes. Okay. I mean, it's not unique to our program here on 3ABN. There's programs that help educate people on cooking. This is vital. Down at your church, in the CHIP program,
right,
you teach people how to cook.
It's a big thing.
And so what I want to introduce our viewers to is Gardenia Montalvo. Gardenia came to us in dire physical straits, and one of the things that changed her perspective was seeing that a vegetarian diet was accessible. It was something she could do.
Not the what, but the how.
That's right.
That's what she learned. Well, let's look at that.
The cooking classes are incredibly fun because first you get a demonstration by two professionals trained in cooking, And then you go hands-on to the stations and you make a couple of dishes, and it's so enjoyable. And you learn to work with soy-based products and make delicious food, which I thought wasn't possible. Like, I didn't miss at the Thanksgiving table anything. I thought it was having a totally normal Thanksgiving dinner, and there was only plant food there on the table, and everything was delicious.
That's great. And now she's saying, maybe I know how to do this. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's not, the cooking classes we do at the Lifestyle Center of America are different than some cooking programs. They're actually hands-on. I think would help our viewers, Don, if I showed you some footage of our cooking classes and just explain a little bit of how we do things there.
Good, great. Let's look at that, and why don't you just walk me through it as we're watching.
I'll do that.
All right. So right here, this is the situation we have. What's going on here?
What you see, we've actually got 6 different stations. We're focused in on 2 of the stations, now on 1 here.
And these are guests that are preparing food?
These are guests, people with various health concerns, some just wanting to prevent disease, but many with things like diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, weight problems. And they're learning actually to cook. There's our cooking instructor, Jody Crandall, there in the white apron.
Okay.
And she's explaining to some of our guests, that's what we call our patients, how to prepare the meal. They've got the recipe there, they're cutting the food, they're preparing it, and it's astounding to many of them because they say to us, wow, you know, we're not only learning a better diet, but we're actually preparing it ourselves. And not only do they prepare the food, they taste the food. They see how they do, and this is shortly before our noon meal is served, and they're trying out what's actually going to be served then in the dining room. They're going to eat the food that they made.
Oh, so this menu goes along with what they're going to actually be eating.
That's exactly right. And, you know, as they're experiencing the diet there at the Lifestyle Center of America the first few days, I mean, it is good. It's good food. And the guests do a great job. I often joke with them, Don. I say, boy, if you lose your job, you know, you've got another profession to fall back on because they're learning this skill of cooking.
You know, I think that's so important. In our program, what we try and do is each week they have a day that they prepare everything. They prepare the food, and there might be 6 to 10 people around the table, and each of them take a different menu item. And as they take that menu item, then they come back. And there's always disasters. I mean, especially when I'm involved in cooking. But where there are failures, there's also successes. And by the end of it, I mean, we're getting it down.
And so the points we're trying to make here is that people that when they look at their diet and they've been told they need to change, or they're reading things and saying they need to make changes, I first always try to tell people, don't be afraid to make dramatic changes. Don't be afraid to make clean breaks with certain things if that's what you need to do. That doesn't mean necessarily being a total vegetarian.
Okay.
It may mean making a clean break with red meat. Maybe that's what someone needs to do.
The initial step.
Yeah, or a clean break with ice cream.
Okay.
If that's one of the things that's undermining your health.
Careful now.
Okay, well, I know I can get on some thin ice here.
All right.
That's not a message I'm telling everyone that they've got to give up certain foods, but you've got to identify what things are getting in the way of your health goals.
What you want for you. In other words, you know this causes this or that. You know what's going to lead to, so you make the decision in light of the scientific facts.
That's right. And Don, I always try to bring it onto a spiritual level. Because we've got a God who tells us He's interested in us having abundant life. God is willing to direct us in lifestyle. I mean, think about the 10 Commandments. I mean, that's a pattern for lifestyle, isn't it?
In relationships, basically.
Exactly. The interesting thing about the 10 Commandments is they talk mostly, for the most part, about clean breaks. It doesn't say it would be a good idea to kill less, right? It doesn't say, you know, limit adultery.
It says don't do it.
That's right. But we're afraid as people to often make those clean breaks. But there is power in clean breaks, especially if God has called you to do it. And so I tell people, pray, ask God what He's calling you to do.
What He wants you to make a clean break.
That's right. Does He want you to walk away from the meat? Does He want you to walk away from certain sweet foods? Doesn't mean you have to be a total vegetarian and never touch dessert. Now,
okay, go ahead.
Here's where it really gets interesting. Not only does it demand that we are willing to make some changes, not only does it demand that we can see that the new lifestyle is accessible, whether it's through a cooking class or something else.
How to do it.
How to do it. But you know, the other critical ingredient is we need role models.
Role models.
That really helps the process. I say we need them. It sure makes it a whole lot easier.
Physicians like yourself or people, Lifestyle Center of America, or...
I'll tell you, yeah, staff is great there, people in the community. You know, I love the experience of our cooking school instructor, Jody Crandall, because Jody, by her own admission, couldn't cook. We've got a clip of Jody talking about her experience.
This is before she worked with you.
Before she worked with us.
Okay, let's join Jody.
Being a vegetarian is very exciting. It's an adventure for me. I used to eat meat until I was about 25, 27. And I actually had just learned to cook when I went away to college. So I can relate to a lot of the students that don't cook. I've never really tried. I tell them, if I can cook, so can you. I could burn water in a pan, and I've learned to cook. And I love it. And I became a vegetarian when I was going to college, because it was an adventure. I never heard of it before. I thought it would be fun to try, and it has been a lot of fun. I have found so much variety. For every meat that you have out there, there's got to be at least 7 beans to each one. And the grains, and people don't really know about all the grains that are out there. You've got whole wheat rather than just white flour. You've got millet. They think it's just for birds, but it's actually delicious.
I like that. She's looking at this as an adventure, more than just I had to change, I had to give up this, I had to give up that. She likes it. It's almost like she's contented. Is that the secret, contentedness?
That's one of the secrets, Don. You know, when God gives us a program, whether it's something we like at first or not, Paul said he'd learned in whatever state he was in to be content. At first, that contentment is we're just trusting the Lord sometimes, because it's difficult at first to develop new habits. When we stick with a new way of living, the Lord actually changes us. It's the way He's made us. And so we develop these new enjoyments, and then we get the benefits from that lifestyle. So the message I try to give my patients is don't hold back from making big changes if that's what God is calling you to do. He'll give you the power to make those changes.
Give you the friends.
That's right. Look for the support network. Look for people who've done it before. Look for people who can walk you through it. And whether you've got to come to Oklahoma or to your neighborhood church or your next door neighbor, take advantage of those resources that are there.
Get involved. Have people help you. This is what it's about. We've been talking with Dr. David DeRose. It's possible you can make the choices that you need to make. God can give you direction in that. He can lead you to people that can help you, maybe a place like the Lifestyle Center of America or your local church. And you can be content with the choices that you've made. We hope today's program gives you health that lasts for a lifetime.